Good, happy Thursday evening, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this Thursday evening edition of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Let's begin. We have a lot of news to get to this Thursday evening, so let's get started. First up, national coronavirus updates. President Trump working with FDA to fast-track malaria drug for treatment. Here's the latest. In the United States, there are at least 10,900 cases across all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico, the U.S., Virgin Islands, and Washington, D.C. At least 168 have died from the virus. The president tweeted Wednesday that the northern U.S. border would be closed to all non-essential traffic. He said trade would not be impacted by the border shutdown. Several states are closing bars and restaurants, but encourage restaurants to offer takeout and delivery. Some states have postponed primary elections. President Trump recommended that people don't gather in groups of more than 10 people and declared a national emergency. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin is working with Congress to get checks sent to all U.S. households to stimulate the economy, along with a 90-day delay for tax payments. The Senate acted on the economy front, approving legislation to guarantee sick leave to workers sickened by the disease. Rep. Mario Diaz of Florida and Rep. Ben of Utah have tested positive for the virus. The U.S. Department is advising American citizens to avoid all international travel due to the global effects of COVID-19. Governor Chris Sununu announces aid for small businesses, $50 million fund for health care. 5 more people test positive in New Hampshire for COVID-19, health officials say. COVID-19 in New Hampshire, what you need to know. Let's take a look. $39 number of people in New Hampshire who have tested positive for COVID-19. 227,310 number of people worldwide who have tested positive. 2 number of people hospitalized with COVID-19 in New Hampshire. 150 number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States. And 9,311 number of deaths from COVID-19 worldwide. 7 people in Grafton County have it, 4 in Carroll, 2 in Belmont, 1 in Merrimack, 17 in Rockingham, and 8 in Hillsborough. The common symptoms: fever, cough, difficult breathing, how it spreads. Prevention tips. Three Salem firefighters quarantined after possible exposure to COVID-19. Department awaits for test results as firefighters remain in isolation. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9, Ray Brewer.
At the Salem Fire Department, 7 firefighters are off the job, unable to respond to calls, placed into quarantine after possible exposure to COVID-19.
We haven't had anyone show any signs or symptoms yet, but they've been exposed, so we need to deal with them as an isolation quarantine.
The fire chief, who doubles as the town's director of emergency management, says they've been on 34 calls where firefighters have possibly been exposed to COVID-19.
Based on the 911 screening criteria that we use when we talk to the patients about recent travel, fever, cough.
In these cases, 1 firefighter started exhibiting symptoms on Friday. The other cases came about as firefighters responded to 2 medical calls, one on Saturday and one on Monday. And while normally firefighters will do an assessment and determine if they need protective gear,
everything rapidly occurred when they arrived on scene, and they just weren't able to maintain that physical distancing and right off and get their protective equipment put in place.
The chief says one thing that would help immensely is getting test results back as soon as possible, and they are working with the state to develop a protocol.
Trying to get the patients that we deal with pushed to the top of the list in the sense so that we can get our workforce and our emergency responders back on the street.
The chief says he's not sure when he will get the test results, but he is sure this is not the only time firefighters are going to have to be quarantined. So they're looking for a regional solution to avoid putting too much strain on one department. In Salem, Ray Brewer, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Coronavirus in Massachusetts, Thursday, March 19th, update. New cases, 72. Total cases, 328. Source under investigation, 151. Maine CDC announces 10 new coronavirus cases in state. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9. Sorry, from WMTW News 8 Maine. Sorry about that, everyone.
Broken heart.
I got to hold him for about 5 minutes.
Of the new positive cases of COVID-19 announced today, 2 of those are seniors who did contract the virus at the Ocean View Living Facility. Now that facility has issued a shelter in place to try and limit the spread. Certainly concerning, considering those residents are in a high-risk age group. And Dr. Shaw from the CDC also wants to remind young people that 40% of those who are hospitalized nationally are between the ages of 20 and 40.
Young folks are not immune or invincible with respect to COVID-19.
A few groups of people the CDC is sharpening their focus on are people hospitalized, healthcare workers, first responders, homeless people, and pregnant women.
Ensuring that folks who are in those categories can get tested quickly and that we can get results back to healthcare providers as quickly as possible.
Of the 52 Mainers who tested positive, 4 are hospitalized, and 1 person has recovered. At the state lab, more than 2,000 tests have come back negative. The CDC is also allowing pharmacies to make and sell their own hand sanitizer since there's a shortage in the state. And Dr. Shaw continues to ask people to slow the spread of coronavirus through social distancing, ending his announcement with a quote from the band Coldplay.
We should be all asking ourselves this. Are we part of the cure, or are we going to be part of the disease?
Dr. Shaw says social distancing does not equal social isolation, so take the time to connect with others virtually or simply wave to your neighbor from a distance. In Augusta, I'm Talia Clark for WMTW News 8.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And let's take a look at that U.S. stock market for all of you and see how your U.S. stock market closed for this Thursday evening. And here's a check at that U.S. stock market, as you can see. Dow rises more than 100 points in rebound. 3-year low. Tech and energy shares led. Stocks closed higher Thursday, ensuring steep losses from earlier in the day as strong gains in big tech shares led to sharp turnaround. Stricter measures in U.S. as coronavirus cases grow. Let's take a listen to that video from Good Morning America, ABC News.
Worldwide, the number of cases crossed 200,000. According to the Johns Hopkins tracker, 84,000 people have now recovered. And a bit of encouraging news out of China. The country reported no new local infections for the first time since this crisis began. Back at home, the first 2 members of Congress have tested positive. Other lawmakers are now self-quarantining, which is complicating the effort to pass major new legislation to address the economic impact. President Trump has signed the bill that includes free testing and paid leave for employees. A massive $1 trillion-plus bill that will send checks to Americans and loans to businesses is being negotiated.
And Dr. Jen Ashton and the Surgeon General both will be joining us live this morning to help guide us through the day's headlines. But we begin our coverage with Whit Johnson here in New York, where cases continue to escalate. Good morning, Whit.
Michael, good morning to you. The federal government is now closing the U.S. border with Canada to all non-essential traffic, and there could be limitations on the border with Mexico as well. The Pentagon, meantime, is deploying 2 hospital ships to both coasts, including here in New York, as health officials warn of a potential overflow in patients. This morning, the White House ratcheting up the war against COVID-19.
I view it as, in a sense, a wartime president. I mean, that's what we're fighting.
Adopting increasingly strict measures to limit the spread as the number of confirmed cases in the U.S. passes 9,400.
We must sacrifice together because we are all in this together and we'll come through together.
President Trump also asked why some high-profile people, including NBA players, seem to be getting access to the test more easily than other Americans.
How are non-symptomatic professional athletes getting tests while others are waiting in line and can't get them? Do the well-connected go to the front of the line?
Well, you'd have to ask them that question. I mean, I've read. No, I wouldn't say so, but perhaps that's been the story of life. That does happen on occasion.
Overnight, the NBA commissioner defending the process, saying teams were following instructions from health officials.
I understand from a public health standpoint why some people have reacted the way they did, but I'd say from an NBA standpoint, we were following directives.
On Capitol Hill, at least 2 members of Congress have now tested positive for coronavirus. Representatives Ben McAdams of Utah and Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida. Other lawmakers who've come in contact with them now on self-quarantine, potentially complicating plans to pass another economic stimulus package to combat the virus. This as the country's toughest restrictions are underway in the San Francisco Bay Area. Mobby Ellis among the nearly 7 million people under that 3-week shelter in place, now learning to homeschool her twins.
We started online instruction starting yesterday, and we'll be having it for the next month.
In New York State, the number of cases jumping into the thousands as non-essential businesses across the state are instructed to keep 50% of their workers at home. Governor Cuomo warning of a major deficit in ICU beds, saying that President Trump has agreed to send mobile field hospitals and a Navy hospital ship to free up space for patients.
The U.S. Comfort, it has about 1,000 rooms on it. It has operating rooms, and the president is going to dispatch the Comfort to us.
Across the country, medical workers becoming increasingly desperate for protective equipment. In Washington state, staffers at Providence St. Joseph Health stepping up, making surgical masks and face shields by hand.
We started with that, one, because it's most critical, that we have some facilities that are very close to running out.
Immigrations and Customs Enforcement announcing it will scale back apprehensions of immigrants to protect officers and reduce spread. Police departments in cities like Chicago and Philadelphia making sweeping operational changes. No longer jailing for nonviolent offenses as the coronavirus threatens to strain resources.
The department is not turning a blind eye to crime. We will continue to enforce all laws. When we are on the other side of this health crisis, we will return back to normal operations.
Now, there is some encouraging news here in New York. Governor Cuomo says that 100 patients, more than 100 patients who tested positive for coronavirus are now out of the hospital and have recovered. We're also hearing from the wife of that attorney at the center of an outbreak in Westchester County. He was in critical condition. She says on Facebook that he's now alert and awake and seems to be on the road to a full recovery. George?
Those recovery stories are encouraging. Okay, what?
Well, hey there, GMA fans.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And that does it for this evening edition of the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another newscast. Good night, everyone, and bye.